Thank you. Quick note, can everybody hear me okay if I'm, okay, perfect. Do you want to do a quick test? Everybody can hear Kongjian okay?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
And before we get started in this conversation, just a quick note on format. So we'll start off, Kongjian and I are going to talk for a few minutes, just kind of some recaps and takeaways from the lecture. And then we're going to, most of this, we want to open it up to this audience and have all of you ask questions. So there will be someone coming around with a microphone. When we do that, just try not to take the microphone, just speak into it, ask your question, and we'll keep things moving. So, all right. Get your brains going. Think of questions. So, Kongjian, thank you so much for that lecture. I did work with Heather Morgan in the past, and I can say from personal experience, she would be very, very proud to have heard your message today, and I think she'd be applauding in the audience. So you have a little tiny vision. I'm kidding. So this has evolved from Sponge City to Sponge Planet. Can you talk a little bit about how you adapt the Sponge City concept to different geographies, different contexts? I think, I'm thinking off the top of my head of New York specifically. How do we take something that's a vision that you have that's applied in other places, and how would that work in the context of a really dense built urban environment like New York, where there's really a limit to the amount of available space and open land?
Well, yes. As you can see, I'm a landscape architect, and I have to say, particularly, I'm a peasant. Peasantry, work with dirt. So it is the land and water, particularly water, is a key for everything, And water triggers the whole system. If you have water, you can turn the moon into a large globe, right? So that's why, based on the experience, I think water is a key to transform the global service. And today I already show all these data, which been almost hidden. Not many people talking about this kind. All people talking about carbon, right? Carbon. So, but carbon is something, a tragedy of commons, which means it's not related to your backyard. It's not related to your people, right? So water is related to everyone. Your body is 80%, 7% of water, and your backyard, your flower, your gardens, and your watershed. So that's a connector. That's one thing, okay? And there's something, and water is common. Drought, flood, evaporation. So water is, so then I come to the modular, to the very simple tool when you see everywhere. Actually use a simple tool to manage water. That's why you can develop something. It can be applied anywhere, right? Can be applied anywhere. A problem are different, but the solution is the same. Some very dry areas, some very flood. So you can create a module. You can create technologies that can solve the problems. You need to solve a drought. You need to solve the problem of flood, and that's why you have all this landscape practice. So I think today landscape should be proud that we're going to upfront of climate action. Before, we are just doing some narrow piece of the green space. Most of it's been taken over by civil engineers, and now I think landscape architect should be a new profession that will be at the central stage of the climate action. Yeah.
Okay, so picking up on that, do you see yourself as having had a lot of success so far in influencing climate policy beyond just implementing site-specific projects, but actually working with governments, municipalities to change policy? And do you see that as sort of a key role for landscape architects in the future?
Yeah. Well, Adrian used to be my partner, my Turenscape. Adrian, you should introduce yourself. Adrian is the grandson of Pearl Buck, by the way. The grandson of Pearl Buck. You know anyone know Pearl Buck?
Yeah.
Yeah, Pearl Buck work with us. Yeah, so it's called as a good Earth. I use that book for textbook for our student back to GSD actually. Everyone, you should read the book, Good Earth. That's and you can speak later, but yeah.
Come on up.
Yeah. That's why I think not only project, I think we have a huge impact in China, particularly. Adrian knows that. I write letter to leaders of China. I write textbook. I wrote 3 textbooks, particularly for CCPC Chinese officials, Chinese Communist Party leadership, and it's a book which being forwarded even by President Xi. There's a book called Build a Beautiful China. And I was a major I'm as a leader of the team for writing the textbook. So it's become a policy, changing in China. I think it must, the president is the #1 designer of the land. When we look at, there's an American writer, he said, landscape is a projection of social formation. Okay? Any social policy will eventually have a mark on our land. So other way, you want to transform the land, you need to transform the social, political formation. So far, I think we made a contribution to that, but that's not enough. As I said, it should be UN policy, should it be global policy, should it be, as we already have a carbon policy today, by carbon trade, carbon credit, those policy and the financial tools, we invest so much, as I said, 7 trillion, projection of 7 trillion invested, and 1.7 trillion, 1.7 trillion invested every year, try to solve the problem of carbon. But only 0.2 trillion for the nature-based solution. Why you don't, invest more, or 1 trillion, for example, will fix the problem. That's why I think we need to transform the UN policy, to speak to this person here at the headquarters or something like that. I think that's why we needed to make these people, more and more people understand that. In the past 30 years, we waste 30 years. Now we cannot waste anymore. As just these guys spoke, it's already too late. But if we turn around and find a new way, we have to find a new way and a new policy. Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
No, that's great. I think it's a call to action for all of us, whether we're landscape architects or others in various related professions. You've been working at Sponge Cities for a while. I think you showed some amazing examples of projects that you've completed recently in the presentation that you gave earlier today. And I think many of us, myself included, were very jealous of the 1-year completion timeline that you kept touting. It takes us often a year just to get something permitted here and agreed to, much longer to get built, so congratulations. I would love to hear some of the things you've learned along the way, like from the first project that you did, that was the first Sponge City intervention, to projects that you're doing now. What are some of the key lessons that you've picked up, maybe hard lessons, that you had to learn from seeing how things actually turned out, and how are you applying those today?
Yes. So first Sponge City project is when I was like 10, 12 years old. I helped my villagers to dig out a pond to solve the problem of drought. That's my first lesson, to say, you want to catch water, you want to solve the problem of drought, or you want to solve the problem of flood, create a pond, And then as a lesson I learned when I was about 10 years old, I fell into the creek. People will say, you know, if I fall in the same creek, which is concretized, it's become concrete channelized, I will be drowned. I'm sure I will be drowned, right, during the flood. But in that case, in the back, you know, when I was 10 years old, the creek was all covered with trees. You know, the creek and blue and green is all totally mixed up, like Amazon River. You know, see, that's a sponge. So that's my second lesson. You know, if you wanted to make the waterway safe, you want to keep the water, you want to make it lively, you need to sponge. So these are kind of first lesson if you want to. But not until 2000, we built a first project in China. Designed it as we call the landscape of us. But as I said, the roots go all the way back to my village experience, monsoon culture, how you adapt to this flood, to this drought. So when I come back, I also get a degree from JST here. But you get 2 degrees, I get 1. But it's only, so in 2000, I went back in 1997. In 2000, I built this project. It's literally inspired by my farming experience combined with modern technology and modern science about ecology, about the design, and also a combination of modern aesthetics, yeah? Modern aesthetics, modern values. So this is my first project. Certainly many lessons, I have to say, or experiences, you have to say. The first one is how you counter against the pre-existing ideology and technology and concept. That's the most difficult thing you have to counter. You have to counter the court system, for example. We have all the court systems. The society is a formation of a society, right? You have a court system. You protect water. You know, have how deep the water before you build the fences and the water should not go into your park. And all this is a court system. You have to overcome. So I think the biggest lesson is how can you overcome this court system? You virtually revolutionize. It's overthrown all this. What's left from the industrial civilization, we call it. You need a new civilization. You need a new cultural formation. Well, in the Chinese system, it's kind of top down. That's why you need to convince the decision makers. But in the American system, we'll say you need to convince everyone. The cultural, you have to educate people too. But I do project here also in some part of the world. But I think either way, you have difficulties. Either way, you have difficulties. So lesson. So that's a lesson. Maybe I've designed 2,000 project, but only have 600 built, which means most of them are failures. You cannot convince people. So that's why it is difficult to pass socially, culturally. The second technical lesson I have to say is that this name most time being misused. The sponge city, the concept can be easily misused. So you need to really have the capacity building. How can you create a team, a group of people to really understand this concept? When you look at China, many people say, okay, you build a sponge city. Now Zhengzhou is a sponge city, get flooded anyway, right? Somehow flooded. So sponge city is a failure. No, that's totally wrong because they misused the term, right? That's I think is big lesson. You must be really careful to say you need people to, how can you train people and find the right people, right team, right profession to do the work. The third one is management. Some of the project is mass management. You know, say use the same way of managing the messy sponge. Difficult to manage this kind, because the management system is different from, so sponge city should be, it's a kind of agriculture. It's not a kind of gardening. It's not a kind of ornamental gardening. It is a kind of agriculture. So you need a harvest. For example, if you have a wetland, overgrown, it can easily turn messy. Yeah, overgrown, too grown, yeah, too much overgrown. So that can ruin your project. So you really have to watch that. It's very easy to manage, but the people don't know how to manage. It's basically an agricultural production process. It's not just make beauty. It is how you manage the landscape. And so on. Yeah, many lessons, but I think these are some of the, if I understand the question, yeah.
No, those are great lessons, and there's so much we can dig into here. I am very struck, and I will remember your very succinct synopsis that in China you have to convince the people at the top, but in here we just have to convince everyone. So it's no problem, right, guys?
Yeah.
But I feel like I'm hogging all of your time. I want to open this up to the audience and see folks have questions. I think the woman there in the back, right there, had the first question, and then this gentleman at this table.
Thank you, and thank you for your talk earlier. What would you say were your most successful strategies for getting mayors and other local officials to adopt your plans over the years?
Well, as I said, there's a book here been published in English, by the way, called "Letter to Leaders of China." Letters to Leaders of China. It's been edited and been translated by Michael Sorkin, by the way. He just passed away a couple years ago from New York during COVID, and he did this is his last book, by the way, called "Letter to Leaders of China." I think this is my successful. I have written many letters, 10, 20 letters to the top leadership, and that's being successful. You know, when I want to go back to China, the first book I write actually is a textbook for mayors. Yeah, and that's been translated. Several chapters been translated into English already. It is available, I think. Yeah. Yeah, that's why convincing the influential. My advisor used to say, influences the influentials. Influences who can influence.
Thank you, Dr. Yu. I believe you have been very inspirational today. Before asking my question, I wanted to share a very beautiful Chinese proverb that is part of my life philosophy. It says, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, and the second best time to plant a tree is today. So I believe it's never too late to work on such topics. My question is, I come from North Africa. It's not a tropical climate, it's mostly desert and Mediterranean. My question is the sponge city concept is exclusively for tropical climates, or is there like a way to implement them in such part of the world? And if not, is there any new concept maybe you're working on that is for my region? Thank you so much.
Well, I have to say, I think it's anywhere need a sponge system, anywhere, because water, you need water anywhere, right? Why, you know, if you need water anywhere, that's just anywhere you need a sponge. But the technique is kind of different, as I said. Whether you want to retain water permeable, make water permeable, or you need a little wire, you need a pond or terraces or island. So it depends on the topography or the water situation and the geological situation and the precipitation situation. So my study is based on, I have these several models. Terracing, which been used in America, in ASLA, in Southeast Asia, also not in British landscape, but certainly because British is a pastoral landscape, which inspire Olmsted, by the way. That's why you don't have terrace here, right? Because it's inspired by the mild European landscape. Cattle, sheep, lawns. That's a landscape you don't have terraces. But if you have agriculture instead of pastoral, you will need to keep water, right? You need to keep water. If the climate is not such a good climate like European, I mean, particularly in English landscape, you need to kind of catch water. So that's why Africa need it, but Africa have very late development in terms of agriculture. So you don't have this indigenous agricultural technology yet. So you can adopt, you can adopt this Chinese agricultural technology, by the way. Brazil, they don't have a long tradition of agricultural technology. That's why Brazil got a problem, because they don't know how to adapt to the climate. That's why it causes a problem of flood, right? And America, of course, you have India know how to have these different rotational crops, but because America is so fast, the landscape is so fast, right? So you didn't develop this long heritage about how to turn the land into water-driven agricultural landscape. So, but it's Southeast Asia, India, Malaysia, Chinese, Indonesia landscape, which is aquatic, which is based on the monsoon climate. Now that's why the technology being fully developed, the agricultural technology being fully developed. That's why my skill being inspired by those kind of adaptive monsoon cultures. In Africa, you have very successful project. By the way, very recent project. They sponge the land. They catch water. There's a huge project in Africa, in just a couple years ago. They have successfully covered this land, and become very productive agricultural land. Now that's why I think this kind of technology is particularly useful for African landscape, for African continent. And certainly I am convinced that if we have similar kind of technology, sponge technology in Brazil, will be really very good. Right now, the Brazil landscape, agricultural landscape is just following the American, they cut off the tree, clear out the tree, and miles, 100 miles of wheat and soybeans, no place for water, no patches of wetland, so the water just run away. That caused a problem. And the groundwater drop dramatically. That's why the whole world is run out of water. I mean, underground water, dry out. When you go to America, when you go to the most productive, agriculturally productive area, America, central part, or even Idaho, the surface water just run away, and they keep pumping the groundwater. That's why the groundwater all the way to go to the ocean, because of vapor. You go to the sky, there's a high cloud, and then go to the ocean. That's a problem. Yeah, so I think sponge city, not just for the city, it should be a sponge planet for agriculture, for larger scale landscape management. And by the way, it's not increase any investment. Okay, if you can imagine if you're in Brazil, when you clean up the Amazon forest, I mean, first of all, that's not the right solution, right? You should not clean it. But even if you have to clear the Amazon, you should not clear. You should have a pattern. It should be designed, right? Designed so that this water will return, and you have patches, you have frameworks of ecological native species and water stay there. And this kind of agriculture will be productive, more productive, and certainly it solves the problem of water. Yeah.
We have, 2 other hands up.
Hi, over here. So I know that runoff pollution is a major problem. Has the sponge city proven any positive effects of collecting any runoff pollution and preventing it from going into rivers or nearby oceans?
Oh yes, of course. That's we have so much evidence about that performance. You catch the water, you stop the pollution, because all the pollution, surface water, runoff, urban runoff, all come with water. So if you can slow down water, you have the habitat, you have biodiversity, you have trees growing, and all the pollutant can be removed. The water can be cleansed. 85% of pollution can be cleansed by removed by slowing the water down. Now, by the way, this is American data. Mississippi River, they have the data, already have the data. If you can have all the tributary irrigation system around the Mississippi River become a sponge system, which means vegetation, slow down water, wetland, bioswale system, you can clean Mississippi River virtually. Yeah, that's right.
Hello, yeah. I'm also a landscape architect, so I'm curious, since you work a lot with water, it was really impressive that you complete the projects in 1 year, but what does the design cycle look like? Like, how long does that take, and how do you design with water? Like, do you make physical models, or, because it's tricky to work with water, so just curious to learn about that.
How long? How long it take design?
How long to
what's your process like? Do you develop physical models? Do you work with digital models? Like, how do you design with water?
As I said, in my case, we only have 1 year. Maybe half a year design, 1 year execution, right? In Thailand project, which is 70 hectares, you know, it's the same. 18 months altogether. 18 months during the COVID. With American talented designer, you have a huge capacity here. By the way, landscape, you know, it is. I learned from here. Right? So that's why you have huge capacity. I think designing, you know, if I have the modular system, digital system, you have very detailed topographic system, you easy. I would say 1 year. 1 year from design to build. Model, you don't have to. I mean, because today you have very good DM model already, topographic model. You have all the American have the best geographic information system in the world. Yeah, I learned at history. I worked history in Arkinfo. So you have the best data system in terms of DM, digital data. You don't have to make a physical model. I don't think so. You need no. It's just very efficient way to do it. Yeah.
Hi there. Quick question, or not really a quick question, but I appreciated in your talk how you talked about sort of the acupuncture approach, finding a point. And I think it's interesting when we think about New York City, you know, we have 520 miles of shoreline. Most of that is hardened shoreline. As well as, you know, a lot of combined flooding impacts, not just from coastal flooding, but also from inland flooding. I think the city DEP has identified 86 priority locations. how, if you were going to approach making New York flood resilient, how could we use, I'm not certain that the acupuncture approach would work here. And then just a quick follow-up. We are looking over one of our coastal resiliency projects. Right outside, there's the construction and you can see it. Curious also what your thoughts are just from glancing at that resiliency project. If you had any off the top of your head comments. Thank you.
Yes, as I said, there's three kind of flood, right? One is local. One is local, which means anywhere the water comes from the same area, right? The same area. Can be your garden, can be your district, can be your city. Cities. But all this water we call it, have a drainage watershed. So watershed can be one square kilometer, can be 5 square kilometer, or 1,000 square kilometer. So any water have a watershed system. Yeah. So if you want to solve the local problem, which means within the watershed, you just you can just see how much sponge you need it, right? I would say 10% in New York. 10% will be enough to hold the water. Anywhere, 10%. If it is evenly distributed, 10% will be enough. But if you think about the whole city, some area, very dense, some area not so dense enough. New York, I mean, you can hold water on the roof. Enough space to hold water on site. So that's the on site, retain it. Or you can hold water anywhere. So that's local flood can be solved on site. It should not be a problem. Well, last year I was here in October and in May you get a flood. I visited New York as a Central Park and Copper Hewitt. Yeah, that's a museum near museum. And the water drain out of the park to the street. And we should not blame Olmsted because at that time we don't have the problem of flood yet. But certainly Central Park should catch water instead of drain away water. Now, is it part of a heritage, or is it you can let water come in? No, that's what I said. It is a challenge. You need to give up. It's a very logic idea of heritage. Let the Central Park becomes a central sponge park. At least to solve some of the problem. Any of the street park can be a sponge park, right? Your backyard, your community garden. So that will solve the problem on site. By the way, if everyone doing the same thing together, you can solve the problem in 1 year, all right? Or in 1 month even. So that's local, but we have to find a consensus. You have a consensus to say, we have to do it together, right? But the regional problem, the Hudson River, is huge. It's all the tributary, is from the mountain. Then you have to go to the mountain community. You have to go to your the rural area to say, you need to keep water. You need for example, restore the beaver dam, for example. Beaver dam used to create a sponge system here in New England area, and in North America, it covered by beaver dams, millions of beaver dams, and create all these sponge system. That slow down the water, right? So that's a strategy. So if beaver can do it, we can do it. Yeah, so that's a regional scale, okay, regional solution. Yeah, but as I said, the global solution of sea level rise in the New York waterfront is a global flood, and that's why you need to solve the problem in Mississippi River, in Amazon. You need to solve the problem of Brazilian agriculture and other whole agriculture. So this kind of thing. There's 3 different levels. Yeah, but if you have the consensus, you can imagine we have 8 billion people in the world. Everyone become part of the sponge movement. Solve your backyard. solve the problem. They solve a problem of a backyard. So you can imagine we can solve the problem. It's a global problem in a couple years. Because the job can be distributed, right? Distributed. So different from carbon solution. Carbon solution have no connection to your personal action. You reduce, certainly, but you cannot measure it. You cannot touch it. It's not connected. You have to do down to earth. It's not a high tech. It's a low tech, because everyone can do it. Everyone can do it. Yeah, even very remote African community can do it. Yeah.
Your optimism is infectious. I love it.
I'm very optimistic, but certainly I'm thinking we need a global policy, unified policy, to mobilize the 8 billion people. Yeah.
I think we have many more questions now.
Yeah,
I think the gentleman here at the table in the front had his hand up earlier, and then we'll go to and then you.
Back to New York just for a minute. Lauren, you mentioned land is very valuable here. I was interested, you showed 4 different ways of sculpting your sponge gardens, but can you talk about land versus in water solutions? Because that's actually a challenge in New York where we have so much waterfront, but very little upland. So can you talk about that a little?
I didn't catch quite much the question. You mean?
Like building, allowing the water in and doing sponge city interventions in the land versus building out into the water as a form of flood mitigation.
Well, as I said, you cannot mitigate the flood caused by global sea level rising. So that's we have give up, right? Which means you cannot build a wall because a wall will collapse someday, will cause a catastrophic problem here, right? Because of killing people, million people. If you build a wall like high, right? So water will pour into your. So building wall is not a good solution. Yeah.
No, not a wall, but in water versus on land.
Yeah, inland certainly I think is fine because it didn't increase any of the. It didn't take water space in terms of New York here, right? I would say yes. I would say yes. You build in the water, fine, right? But yeah, because it's a sea level rising problem. You can build in water here. I have to say. But there's a local flood. If you want to say I want to solve the downtown, New York problem, you have plenty of space. I have to say you have plenty of space. The roof, the parking lot. By the way, the parking lot can be a big release in the future because the autonomous auto come in. You can save maybe 50% of parking lot. Narrow the street, but the street is already narrow. But certainly you make it pave more permeable, more green space, or more. At least the parking lot can become a sponge.
Okay, we have another question up here in front.
Yeah, hi. Thank you so much for the lecture so far. I was just wondering, I know you say, a year time is typically the development time for these sponge cities. For a city, for example, that floods yearly, how do you build around a disaster that happens? Because trees don't grow instantly. These things won't happen immediately. How do you build around a disaster that's ongoing?
You mean to make more resilient, right? The disaster. Flood.
Yes. Like if there's yearly floods every year, how do you plan to build so that, because the floods may come and wash away whatever progress you've made. So how do you build around a place where that's constantly flooding?
Yeah, as I said, there's 3 kinds of flood. If you build in the valley, the water comes from the mountain, right? So you have to solve the problem of the mountain. You need a sponge on the mountain, on the slope, right? But if you want to solve the problem of a local flood, like your basement flood, it's a local sponge system. Or just action. As I said, it's not too long-term action. If we have consensus to say as I did, it can be easily solved. But as a sea level rising needed time because I said it's a global action. Yeah. If you're building a seawall, maybe 20 years, 30 years, you have to be prepared that it can cause more disastrous situation, more disaster, more fatal disaster like New Orleans. Imagine if you don't have a New Orleans wall, you will not build a house under the dam, right? That's why. So building a dam is like drinking poisonous drink. It will kill you. Even you even solve the thirst for an hour, will eventually kill you, right? Yeah.
On that cheery note, we have time for just one more question, and then we'll give Kongjian a chance to just kind of close this out.
Hi. I'm wondering if you've done any work so far or what your thoughts are about potential challenges or opportunities of taking the sponge city concept into a potable water source in future cities that might be experiencing drought conditions in their watersheds for clean drinking water. Obviously, we've heard you talk about plants filtering pollution, but that next level of making it something that people can drink to preserve water. Like, what are your thoughts on that? What opportunities and challenges do you see?
In the rural area, it can be easily potable water, right? In the rural area, because water basically is a runoff from agriculture. You can catch agricultural runoff, so pesticide, chemicals. In urban area, how can you turn the potable water? You have to separate the sewage system with the stormwater system. Well, in New York, you have this combined system. Most of the cities already is a combined system, which means the water is polluted because of overflow of the sewage system. So you have to separate, and the stormwater can be easily portable. Yeah, that's right.
Sure. We have time for one more.
I mean, I'm gonna follow the similar path. Like, what you're showing in the projects is like typically built on the riverbank. You're kind of expanding towards the land. Did you do any like kind of floating over the land, built on the land, on the sea? Sorry, over the sea, like something floating. Is that possible? I mean, typically, like when you see the New York Edge,
no, that's
going over the water. Is that a strategy?
The last two projects is all seafront, ocean seafront. As I said, it's not about sea level rising. Sea level rising is millimeters. 10 years, 3 millimeter. I mean 1 year millimeter. So it is a surge. There's a surge causes a problem, and the surge. That's why we build the horizontal dam, not the vertical dam, because the surge can be, because it takes 100 years to get this. So that's why if you can solve the problem, urgent problem, sea level rising, is not an urgent. But the surge is an urgent, okay? Yeah, the surge is an urgent. So it is this destruction of the balance of the globe. The whole weather be messed up, right? It's messed up. So you have a huge surge, you have a heat wave. So this, you need immediate solution. As I said, slow down the surge, build the horizontal wall, for example. But in long term is to transform the whole globe into a sponge. Now that may take time, as I said, but if we have consensus, it can be not a big deal. Yes.
Okay. All right. So before we close this out, I want to just ask if there's any big takeaways that you want everyone here to kind of take with them after this. If you had one piece of advice for everyone, you've mentioned a number of times that all we have to do is get everybody to work together, and then it'll be no problem. But besides that, is there one lesson that you want everyone to take with them, from your talk today?
Yeah. No, I think I just gave a webinar a couple of days ago by this Cultural Landscape Foundation, and there's about 100 people, 100 audience, 90% of them are from America, North American. So you really concerned about climate change. No, that's a good thing, okay? It's really the underdeveloped regions suffering. And they are not aware much. You are aware so much, right? So you have this cultural, the mass cultural grassroots already understand climate change issue. As I said, climate is changing, but the science is misleading to some degree. And the message is not complete. The message is not complete. It's misleading by this carbon. So all the action by this mass, you have all these NGO organizations have a passion for climate change. But I have to say, the passion needed to be go the right way. Then you will solve the problem. Oriented toward water and land, not the carbon. Okay, I'm not saying carbon is, but I said the more important is here. More investment, more passion should be here. So this American energy should be put into movement to solve the problem of soil and water, not on carbon. Carbon certainly, yes, you already have this passion enough, I would say. And Indian and Indonesia, Malaysia, Africa will produce more carbon in the next century. You have to see it. So when you reduce carbon as much as possible, put more energy toward here, more NGO, more movement toward water. That's my takeaway.
Okay. Kongjian, thank you so much for coming all the way here to be with us today.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.